Yo, what up? This is D Knight, and you're listening to the Pardon the Interaction podcast. My oh my, we've had so much going on. For starters, in case you missed it, we've got a new addition to the Pardon Pie family, Tara Dublin. Make sure you go follow her on Twitter at Tara Dublin Rocks. Also, pick up a copy of her book while you're at it. Make her day, The Sound of Settling. A very fun and interesting read compared to the things we talk about on this podcast. But yeah, we're heading toward the do or die time for the 2024 election. Go ahead and hit up JoeBiden.com. Get that man like $1 a month or something. Help his campaign staff up and get prepared to try and save our democracy. And make sure to grab like one other person you know and tell them about the podcast. Make sure they subscribe and tune in every single week. We got a lot of things coming up for you this year. We need all the support that we can get. So if you do your part and help us grow our audience, we'll do our part and help elect Joe Biden in 2024 and save American democracy. And this is the Pardon the Interaction podcast. Yo, what up? It's your boy D Knight, and you're listening to the Pardon the Interaction podcast. We have yet another Pocket Pardon episode for you today. It was a wild and crazy week, of course. It seems like every week is wild and crazy. That's nothing new. It's not a new occurrence. Seems to be the normal here. Everything is going berserk as per the usual. I guess I should have adjusted to that by now. But before we get into the insanity, a quick word from our sponsor, Sheets and Giggles. Colin McIntosh, the CEO, sent me a wonderfully fantastic set of sheets. I love those things. They're incredibly soft and incredibly comfortable. And I would wager that if there was one change that you could make to Rice Street Jail down in Fulton County, that would almost make it amenable to having someone who is accustomed to the mid-quality sleeping experience of a Trump property. And the one thing you could probably change is adding a set of sheets from Sheets and Giggles. Like, that would instantly bring up the quality of Fulton County Jail at bare minimum to like the level of Mar-a-Lago or like Bedminster or something. Like, Sheets and Giggles sheets are so good that like they can turn the crappiest conditions into at least like minimum Trump property level. So make sure you grab a set of sheets or other wonderful items that they have available to you on their website, sheetsandgiggles.com. And if you're looking for a discount, we've got links in the show notes to help provide that for you as well. All right, on to the crazy fucking goddamn insane news, because it never ends. At the end of this previous week, we had U.S. District Judge Timothy Kelly in D.C. sentence a number of Proud Boys after their convictions for seditious conspiracy for the role they played in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. And I gotta say that as pleased as I am to see these people facing some fucking criminal consequences for their egregious behavior, I'm also shocked and appalled at the level of leniency they received. And I'll give you a couple of examples of the length of these sentences. First of all, so Ethan Nordine was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Dominique Pazola was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And I know you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of time, D. Why you so upset at like the length of these sentences? Like, that seems fairly significant. So I wouldn't want to spend, 10 to 20 years of my life in jail. Well, if you look at the sentencing guidelines and what the Justice Department was asking for, the judge gave them half the time in prison that the sentencing guidelines recommended. Like, not just a downward departure of years, but like a downward departure of like a decade each. Nordine was one of the people who were on the ground January 6th, orchestrating the attack by the Proud Boys on the police and entering the building and searching for our elected officials. He was one of the guys who did a lot of the legwork, recruiting members of the Proud Boys to come to the Capitol on January 6th, who were, quote, prepared to engage in physical violence if necessary. As the attack on the Capitol ensued on January 6th, he was the guy, because Enrique Tarrio had been ordered to leave town, Nordine was the guy the other Proud Boys looked to for direction. Pazola, who was also deeply involved in orchestrating the attack on the Capitol, though not the leader, in his attempt to receive a sentence reduction, he seemed quite regretful about his actions on January 6th. But as soon as his sentence was handled down, he ran out into the hallway and yelled, "Trump won!" on his way out of the courtroom. Yeah, fuck these guys. Clearly not remorseful for their actions at all. And I'm sure the judge will actually hear about that outburst and might circle back and readdress Pazola's sentencing and tack on a couple of years for a lack of remorse. Because clearly, he didn't learn his fucking lesson. You know, this was the guy, Pazola, who had the stolen police riot shield that he used to break through the window at the Capitol. He was like the first person to find a vulnerable entrance to the Capitol that allowed other people to enter the fucking building. And this dude was like prosecutors were trying to get 20 years behind bars for this guy, and the judge cut that in half. Now, while the judge did say that he understood the egregious nature of the crimes committed by these individuals, he had to sentence them in such a way that was in line with other sentences for similar behavior that were handed down to individuals convicted before the Proud Boys here were sentenced. And because the Oath Keepers convicted of similar charges, seditious conspiracy and otherwise, received sentences that were well below the sentencing guidelines, this judge felt that he had to follow in suit. Otherwise, the sentences would likely to be overturned on appeal. And of course, we don't fucking want that. Although DOJ saw the remedy to this potential issue by appealing the sentences of the Oath Keepers and saying, "Hey, this shit wasn't long enough. You gotta lock their asses off for longer than this, so when we convict other people, everyone will serve a reasonable amount of time, an appropriate amount of time in prison for their actions." Man, I hate to take victory and turn it into defeat, but I'm just very disappointed in this. These dudes should be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. I mean, if you look at the way sentences are handed out for black people, we typically receive sentencing above the recommended sentencing guidelines, no matter how stupid fucking petty the crime is, and we ain't doing shit like trying to overthrow the fucking government. You know, these are people who engaged in hand-to-hand combat with hundreds of police officers for hours on end before attempting to murder our Congress, and they're getting less time than dudes get for weed and coke. It's fucking crazy. Also, I thought that having these trials of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and the other militias involved in planning the ground attack on the Capitol on 1/6, having that occur would take up more of the headlines in the fucking news. You'd be like, man, it really was a seditious conspiracy. It wasn't just a riot that got out of control. These people were actually literally plotting to overthrow the government. And there would be bigger news and take over headlines and have on political polling for candidates up and down the ballot. And it really hasn't. It's fucking insane. The mainstream media isn't going out of their way to harp on how incredibly egregious all of this was. And then the trickle-down effect of that is the public at large doesn't seem to have much interest because the media doesn't really delve into the serious nature of these charges and the importance of these trials. Now, while these charges and these trials have seemingly had a negligible political effect as far as people's tendencies to support one side of the aisle or the other, they do seem to have an apparent practical effect on the public at large, or at least upon Trump supporters. And the way that I would describe that effect is that when Trump is calling for his supporters to come out and rally and protest and practically asking them to commit violence in a way that is plausibly deniable, his supporters be like, I ain't going. They're like, I'm not falling for it. It must be a op. It's a setup by the feds. Because all of the people who attacked the Capitol on 1/6 are getting locked up. And because Trump didn't pardon them, they're afraid to, stick their necks out on Trump's behalf yet again. Because they don't want to go to jail. Which I totally understand. I wouldn't want to go to jail for Trump either. But they also live in this weird reality where they think it's like a trap set by the feds. Except it's Trump asking you to go out and do this shit. Like, I don't understand how you don't see Trump as responsible for the violence on January 6th in that case. Right? You can't say it's a mob that got out of control, but also Trump wants me to go out and commit violence, but I also won't commit violence because it's a trap by the feds, but Trump's the one asking you to do it. Like, I can't square it away. I can't make it make sense. I guess somehow because these people live in conspiracy land, they can find a way to twist anything that they want to in such a way that it absolves Trump from his responsibility and, makes his actions and requests seem reasonable. I can't. I don't know how to make it work. I don't get it. But yeah, it's just wild that these trials have had no effect on the public sentiment at large. But yeah, they've had a huge deterrent on political violence. There's been practically little to no mass violence enacted by large groups of people. We've had some individuals take it upon themselves to, show up at Obama's house with a bunch of guns and ammo. We've had individuals act out in mass shootings. And, while these people are influenced and radicalized by these online far-right groups, it's not as though the entire group is amassing together to create chaos and enact violence. It's just individual actors. And, of course, that's not great. But what I mean is we haven't seen yet another January 6th. So I guess in that sense, the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, taking their time to go after as many individuals as they could possibly find for the attack on the Capitol. That's been a positive. It's had a positive effect, positive outcome. We've seen what I believe to be far less violence than we otherwise would have, considering Trump's now been indicted multiple times. If they had locked all those people up, I think we would have seen massive outbreaks of violence because people would have looked at January 6th and felt like there's zero consequences. There's no reason not to. There's no downside. And of course, Joe Biggs called in the Alex Jones show, InfoWars, the other day, complaining about jail and shit. And, he better be happy he's in Club Fed because them dudes who about to go down for that RICO case down in Georgia, you don't want to see state prison, especially not in the South, homie. He was also asking for financial support for Alex Jones's listeners to donate money to help support his family and shit. Because the government took away his military pension as part of his sentence, which is fucking fantastic. I feel like you don't deserve compensation for the government if you attempt to overthrow the government. I feel like that should be fucking obvious. But then he went on to say that his main hope is that Trump wins the 2024 election because, quote, I know he'll pardon me. I believe that with all my heart. And I'll say this, there are very few things that I have faith in when it comes to Trump, but I absolutely 100% have faith in the fact that if Trump does somehow manage to win in 2024, of which there's no likelihood he can do that without cheating, the first thing he'll do in office is pardon the insurrectionists. That's a good one, right? Because the title of this podcast is Pardon the Insurrection. Although it's meant to be taken tongue-in-cheek, and it's supposed to be a play on pardon the interruption. It's not to be taken literally. Yet here the insurrectionists are literally expecting pardons. Can't beat it. In other news, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell froze up, like a robot whose operating system crashed, like his battery pack, like a Tesla whose battery died, or like maybe, I don't know, a glitch in the fucking Matrix where he just got stuck. This was in the middle of a press conference that he was holding. I actually can't even remember what the fucking press conference was about, to be honest, because the only thing that really stuck out is that, like, he's no longer functioning. Republicans don't have a functioning sitting majority leader. Like, I don't know how this person is supposed to even do his job. But look, you don't have to take my word for it. You can hear it for yourselves. We'll play a clip of Mitch McConnell, and you can judge for yourselves whether or not you think his clone is malfunctioning.
Okay.
Senator, you're up for election in 3 short years. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator. Benny.
Yep.
That's outside. Come with us. Okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
And if you haven't watched the video, I suggest you do that. And one of the conclusions you will draw from just like the long, awkward silence and Mitch McConnell staring blank-faced off into space, into the ether, is that he's clearly brain dead, just totally not functioning as a human being. Even more surprising than that, though, is that he's got like a number of staff surrounding him. And what I find totally bonkers is, like, as absurd and crazy as it is to have Mitch McConnell standing there as an empty husk, like, even more bananas than that is, like, to them, it's totally fucking normal. Like, they don't even, like, break character. They're, like, totally used to this shit. So I would assume it's happening all the fucking time. And this guy's supposed to be leading the Republican Party in the Senate. Like, that's fucking crazy. And, like, no wonder they can't get any fucking shit done. You've got someone whose brain clearly isn't functioning responsible for organizing the entirety of your political approach in one half of Congress. So you can clearly see why the Republican Party is totally dysfunctional. And I know you're going to say, like, well, in the House, they've got Kevin McCarthy, and he seems to be, no, his brain also isn't functioning. He just happens to be able to, like, speak and form semi-complete sentences, though the points he's often making seem totally incoherent. Totally incoherent. And in case you think I'm being hyperbolic about the likelihood that this is happening all the time, you're like, oh, it's just like this is just one instance where he just couldn't hear. Maybe his hearing is failing. Nope. We'll play another clip from the last time that this happened, which I believe was like a little over a month ago. And this makes it quite difficult to argue against.
Path to finishing the NDA this week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Are you good? Mitch?
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press? Go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, good luck explaining that one away, as he just couldn't hear the fucking question. He was in the middle of his answer, and his brain totally malfunctioned. Like, could you imagine if this was President Biden? Could you fucking imagine the media firestorm if President Biden just totally malfunctioned, his programming just totally cut off in the middle of him talking? People would lose their fucking minds. They would lose their minds. Totally lose it. It'd be a bigger story than Trump getting indicted each and every time he's been indicted. Fucking crazy. And then they have the nerve to parade Mitch McConnell out here as though he's like somehow competent enough to even remotely do the job. Like, what is going on here? What is going on? And like, this isn't to say that age is an issue. Like, look, there's already the seeming consensus by the media that, you know, Biden is too old to be running for office for re-election, or at least like this impression that they're lending to the public, that the public should believe that Biden's too old to be running for office. But it's not about age, it's about efficacy, right? Like, instead of asking yourself, is Biden too old to do the job, you have to ask yourself, is Biden effective at doing the job? Where if you ask about his age, they'll just look at the number and say, no, he's too old. But if you ask about his efficiency and effectiveness at doing the job, instead of looking at his age, you look at his track record. And clearly, since he's been in the White House, he's done nothing but the most incredible job. He's out here in Florida after the fucking hurricane, trying to console the people who've dealt with that catastrophe, who've lost property or been through a traumatic experience. He's organizing the relief effort and making sure that federal funds are being sent to the places they need to go. Like, he's out here doing the fucking job and he's crushing it. And if that's the evidence that you look at to decide whether or not he's qualified to do the job, then he's passing with flying colors. Mitch McConnell out here can't even finish a fucking sentence. So I would say that if you want Biden to be president in 2024, you need to look for ways to address the framing of Biden's fitness for office and change it from asking the question about his age to asking whether or not he's been effective at doing the job, and getting people to look at actual evidence instead of making conjectures based solely upon a number. Otherwise, you're going to end up with, you know, season 2 of the Trump administration, and it'll probably be the final season for democracy, because the first thing he's planning on doing is literally pardoning the insurrectionists. Because of course. And that concludes this episode of Pardon the Insurrection.